Hi, very excited to have Kate Fazio from Justice Connect here. Kate's role is Head of Innovation and Engagement, and she's been doing some amazing work with her team using design thinking, and in particular the Gateway project. So we'd really like to go into more detail about that as we go along. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Kate, for giving us the time to come and talk to us about how you're using design thinking.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So I'm going to start off with a question I'm asking everyone. What's your favourite part of design thinking?
I love hearing from users. So the part I find fascinating and rewarding is the way that design methodologies force you to get out there and actually talk to the people that you're designing for, the people that are using your service or the people that you wish were using your service, spending that time listening to them and really busting assumptions. I find it extremely valuable personally for me in trying to design something that's good and useful, but it's also so valuable in a legal setting to bring the consumer's voice into the office, into the design process, to remind people that not everyone thinks and acts like a lawyer, that there are diverse views and diverse worldviews that we need to be bearing in mind and building for when we're designing our services.
Fantastic. So very much the empathy part
Absolutely.
of design thinking.
Yes.
Great. And we were speaking about this a bit before, that idea that empathy isn't something that naturally comes to lawyers sometimes too, because of, I think, the way that we've been trained.
I think we've been trained to be emotionally empathetic, to understand the consequences of a problem for someone, but I'm not sure that we are very good at co-designing solutions with what have traditionally been our clients. We've been set up to be the experts, and we like to listen to our clients and empathise with the situation they find themselves in, but then tell them how we think they can fix it.
Because we've got the solution.
That's right. And so I think the design process really helps to flip that and helps us to reflect on what does the person who has the problem have to add to building out what that solution might best look like.
Right, fantastic. And so talking about bringing a whole lot of skills together to do that too, what skill don't you have that you would like to have?
I think something that I have had to work on really hard over the last 3 years, which is the amount of time that I've been really embracing these methodologies, is listening. Yeah, really listening, not trying to preempt an answer, not trying to get as quickly as possible to the end of the conversation, not trying to be time efficient. Having that curiosity and openness is such a valuable skill, and other professions are particularly good at it. Psychologists are great. They don't tell you what they think the problem is. They sit there and they listen to someone explain the situation, and from what that person says, they ask further probing questions and they're curious. And I think as lawyers, we have a lot to learn from those types of disciplines in how they listen and how they give people room to really express themselves, to not be in that time pressured setting, because when you give that space for expression, you're not hurrying to get to the end, that's where you often get the best insights, and people come forward with the most valuable information right at the end of the conversation when they're feeling really comfortable.
And I think as lawyers too, or in being in the legal profession, being time poor, needing to get things done quickly, that pressure, I think it's almost compounded to the extent that there's an expectation you jump to the solution first.
Absolutely.
So I personally found that really hard to not jump to the solution when I first started using design thinking too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still have to pull myself up on it.
Yeah.
It's a real mind shift.
Yeah. So 3 years now you've been using this methodology and way of thinking. How did you become aware of it?
So I've been working for 7 years at Justice Connect, and for that 7-year period I have been doing product development. So although I'm trained as a lawyer and I've practiced as a lawyer, in my time at Justice Connect I've been more focused on questions of, if we're running a service, how do we scale that up? What channels can we use to reach people that go beyond a one-to-one lawyer-client relationship? So I have been in a design setting for that time. And when you're in a design setting, you inevitably bump up against the various design methodologies. And design thinking and strategic design and co-design were all things that we'd dipped our toe in the water with at Justice Connect. And then when we had our Gateway project, which I was the lead on, it was a big high-risk project, and we decided that we were going to bring all of those tools to that project and use them really rigorously and do them well, so that we would build something good. And so while I'd been testing and playing with them, at that point 3 years ago when we started that project, we brought on some consultants who could teach us really how to do it well and give us the tools that we needed and coach us through that.
Fantastic. And I think some of the words that you're using too are here too. One of the things I think people get a bit confused about is that design thinking in the legal professional generally, it seems to have a whole lot of different names. What sort of name? I mean, I hear legal design, I hear user experience, client experience, all those types of things. What do you see it as?
Yeah, we most refer to it as human-centered design. So we, at its core, what we're trying to do is understand the user's experience and design the best solution. And for many of the products that we're working on, there are many users. So we're dealing in a complex environment. So we have our staff, we have people who need help, we have a complex sector, other system users. And so in designing that complex solution, really mapping out all the different users and humans involved in that system and solution, and then designing something and testing it with each of those different users means you've got a much better chance of building something that will resonate, that will work. And so that's why we focus on the language of human-centered design. But you know, there are a number of different articulations of essentially the same principles, which are, you know, to understand your user, to design thoughtfully with their needs in mind, to test back with your users, to continually be challenging assumptions that you might have about what they want or need or how they'll behave, and then to develop also in a lean way. So we bring in some of the lean methodologies as well, and agile. So as a charity, we can't just invest huge amounts of money in developing up solutions. We are lean. So as a risk management strategy, but also as a good design principle, we try to build up prototypes of things and test them before we invest heavily in building something out to its full extent. So it's interesting that in meeting your users' needs, you're also managing your risks at the same time.
Interesting that you raised that, because it's something I was going to ask you around that, and I'm seeing it too, that melding together of different approaches, that there is design thinking for that initial identification, using your human-centered, user-centered ways of working, then developing something, and then the implementation and the embedding. I love the fact that you can actually then have at the end of it using those different methodologies. So someone before when we were talking about it was talking about that design thinking and the way that you use it can be many different forms, and I love that about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think something that I'm noticing in the legal industry that is a danger with design thinking is that there is a real attention and emphasis on the ideation stage. Everyone loves to get in a room with post-its and ideate and then pick the best idea, but we are perhaps not so good at the implementation piece, at the grind, the really hard work that is involved in putting a product out, testing it, tweaking it, re-releasing it, testing it, adapting it, doing more research. You know, I've been building a number of products for 3 years now, and the amount of work that is involved in getting them right is very significant. And I think that sometimes when people look at design thinking, they think that it's the shortcut to the right answer. But if you actually use those principles properly into their full effect, it's a long journey, and there's lots of going back through that cycle to reach the good outcome. So I think that's an important thing for the legal sector to grapple with and understand as well, is that taking design thinking the whole way through the project implementation, rather than just doing little hackathons or internal ideation sessions, which I don't think are going to create meaningful change or good products.
I think they're really important for the identification or for the empathy even stage of it, and I totally agree too, but that idea of actually being able to produce tangible outcomes, it is what design thinking provides for if you continue on that iteration stage, but a lot of people don't quite get there.
Yes.
Is that your experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, or they'll release something, but then they never evaluate it.
Yeah, fantastic. Obviously, access to justice, or I think access to justice has been a forerunner in terms of using design thinking. I think that's where the legal profession first actually started seeing design thinking being used, and I think there's a reason for that, because there was a real emphasis on designing for the users who would often grapple with legal concepts and that type of thing. I'd really like to hear more from you about that idea of bringing multidisciplines together from that point of view, and how design thinking has helped in the access to justice space from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a few perspectives on that. I think one of the reasons why the access to justice sector has perhaps embraced design thinking and other modalities as well is because it sits so closely adjacent to some other disciplines. So social work, the healthcare system, and those disciplines have been engaging with design thinking and other human-centered design methodologies perhaps a lot earlier and more significantly than the legal sector has. So it makes sense to me that social justice, access to justice organisations were encountering these disciplines perhaps earlier than for-profit firms were in some cases. And because of the complexity of the access to justice challenge, we are often in partnerships with healthcare organisations or social work organisations or housing organisations, and we are very much looking at the user journey and trying to understand at what point can we make an intervention, what is the best point to make an intervention, how do we measure our impact, and we're actually bringing in a whole range of different methodologies and perspectives to our service design. A fair few more, I would say, than the average for-profit business model, which is really concerned with client onboarding, servicing the client. The for-profit business model is a bit more clear-cut than the access to justice one, where there are so many intersectional problems that a client is faced with, which is not to say that that doesn't also happen in a for-profit firm, but it looks a bit different. And I think that another reason the sector has engaged with it is because the sector is so underfunded. We cannot possibly service every person with an unmet legal need with a one-to-one client and lawyer relationship. So we have to look at other ways of meeting that need. We had to pivot. We had no choice. So I think that the motivation to embrace this type of thinking and change is driven by the severe underfunding and basically the desperate desire to try and help more people. So the sector's just looking at all different approaches. On the point of interdisciplinary approaches, so the sector does work with other sectors, but I think when you look at legal aid and community legal centres, for example, there's definitely an appreciation of the value of other disciplines, psychologists, counsellors, developers, service designers, but I don't think we've yet quite nailed how to actually embed that on a consistent basis into organisations. I don't think there's any dispute that it's a good idea, but again, from a funding perspective, it's quite hard to get funding for a developer to just be at your community legal centre and just work with you on products, because that's not how the funding model for community legal services works. So the funding approach to the access to justice sector needs to flex to meet this evolving business practice. Having said that, at Justice Connect, we're lucky that over the 3-year period of our Gateway project, we have been able to secure funding. So we now have an internal innovation team. So we have our own in-house developers, project managers. We have had a psychologist in-house for a period of time. So it's invaluable having them working inside our organisation, really getting to know and understand our users and our the problems that we're trying to solve, the big questions that we're grappling with. Having them in that interdisciplinary setting is just amazing.
That's fantastic, and I think that's that's something too. That mindset change in terms of not of having legal problems seen as benefiting from all of those different disciplines and solving a solution, not just on a project basis, and I think you said this before, not just on a project basis, but all-encompassing sort of way of looking at things too, which traditionally I think in the for-profit area with legal it tends to be siloed, so we don't necessarily have that access to justice leading the way again with that then. It's great. So a bit more now about the Gateway projects. So can you talk me through how you use design thinking to develop that project and the different products that have come out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2016, I'd been at Justice Connect for about 4 years at that point, and I'd been doing some work within one particular program area of Justice Connect, thinking about the systems and the processes and the user experience. And I travelled to the United States to a conference about how technology can be used in the access to justice setting. And I came back with just a list this long of all the different things that we could be doing at Justice Connect. And we realised that there was probably a whole project and a whole role that needed to start grappling with these questions. So eventually I moved into that role, sitting across the organisation, thinking strategically about what do we need to start thinking about in our service design? What do we need to start thinking about to make our services more scalable, able to meet the needs of more users? And we did a big sort of organisation-wide audit, asking staff, just if you had all the money, what would you build? What would you do? Is there something that someone else is doing that you really like? Just getting an internal lens across things, even that really highlighted so many opportunities.
A clean slate.
Yeah, exactly. Blue sky thinking. And that helped to, I guess, create some thematic areas where some improvements could be made. And out of those thematic areas, we were really looking at how do we engage with people who are looking for help? How do we engage with them once they're actually in our services? How are we engaging with the access to justice ecosystem, which is fragmented and complex, and people who are looking for help are just bouncing around, trying different doors, seeing if someone can assist them. And also, how are we engaging with the 10,000 pro bono lawyers that Justice Connect works with? It's a huge resource pool, but it's a complex pool to be managing. And at Justice Connect, we're trying to allocate cases out to those 10,000 lawyers. And there are a lot of bottlenecks and inefficiencies in the way that we were doing that. So they were sort of the thematic areas that we were interested in, and we sort of surfaced that up. And then we approached Google for some funding to help us do a design thinking led research project into these thematic areas, where we would bring the views of all those user groups into thinking about how we improve. And also making sure that we had actually identified all of the areas, because at that point all we had was an internal perspective. So Google did provide us with some funding, and then we spent 12 months researching, prototyping. We held endless workshops and surveys, and we engaged with literally every different user segment that touches Justice Connect, or that we would like to engage with that we weren't currently reaching. And using that design thinking lens, we tried to explore, what does a journey look like? Where are the points of friction? Where are you not finding us when you should be? What are the problems on our end? Where are we struggling? Where are the inefficiencies? And through that, we pretty much validated what our staff had already identified, but enriched the themes and enriched the understanding of the pain points and the different perspectives on why things weren't working. So we had the staff view on why this particular step didn't work well, but we were then able to enrich that with our sector peers' perspectives and our help seeker and client perspectives. And so at the end of that 12-month process, we built a whole product architecture, which was essentially our vision for what Justice Connect would look like if we completely changed the way we were working to be very user-centred, human-centered in our design, which includes the needs of our internal staff as well.
Very important too. And I think that's something
Yeah.
that I've found too in the journey, that people assume sometimes that it's only the end user that's relevant in the design thinking methodology. It's not. It's anyone who's involved in those touch points through the journey, which is really important, especially in the legal profession where you've got different people coming in at different times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we ended up with 4 different sort of product areas that we decided to focus on, and those 4 products all together we called our Gateway project. And then over the last 3 years we've been building them each.
So prototyping them?
Yes, so to begin with we prototyped them and then we tested them further with our users. They've all gone through prototyping phases, MVP, development, release. We have an intake tool which helps people identify whether there's a service at Justice Connect that might be able to assist them online. So it's kind of like a screening tool, but it's extremely user-friendly and it provides real-time feedback to people in an online setting. And then it provides them with a channel to apply for assistance online as well. It's not the only way you can access Justice Connect, but we used to only be phone-based. So now we have this online channel to complement the phone-based entry points. So that has been released, fully evaluated, and we're now building our second release. We have built a similar platform to the intake tool for our sector peers to help them understand Justice Connect, because we're quite complex. We've got lots of different programs and services. They want to send people to us who they can't assist. It's this complex referral network that the legal assistance sector has, and so we want to give them confidence that they understand that there is a service for the person they're looking for assistance for, and that they can then pop that person into our system. So they've made a warm handover of that person to Justice Connect. We get a lot of referral dropout. If they just give a phone number, that person may never end up connecting with us.
Which is something that you obviously found out through the design phase. Yeah,
exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then our Pro Bono portal is really exciting, which is our tool to manage the Pro Bono network that we have access to. We put in all our unplaced cases. It might be legal assistance for individuals, legal assistance for charities and not-for-profits, but also other pro bono opportunities like, can you help an organisation draft a fact sheet? Can you help an advocacy campaign? We put that all into the platform and then it algorithmically matches up with the law firms and the lawyers based on their preferences. We can push it directly to particular ones. They can search for things that match. They get email notifications, so it's quite a sophisticated ecosystem now. Whereas before, for each one of those opportunities, we would have had to look through our list of firms, decide who we were going to send it to, give them a call.
So much more
Play
efficient.
phone tag. Yeah.
Much more efficient, better for everyone involved.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so any surprises for you that came out of using design thinking? So did you get any results, well hopefully you did, but any results that came out of the way that you approached these projects that you don't think you would have got had you not done it, design thinking?
I think because I was already playing with design thinking for a few years, it wasn't a radical new approach for me, having been working in product development already. But I think for certain people at the organisation, having the client or the help seeker's voice in the design process was really valuable to them. I think it helps provide clarity in decision making when you have, it's data-driven decision making. So when you've spoken to a range of people about their experience and they're all saying something pretty consistent, it makes it very easy to make a decision internally. Whereas previously, for that same decision we were trying to make, we might have been hypothesizing around the table about what people might want. So bringing that voice of the consumer into that room made making decisions easier, quicker, and clearer. So I think that was perhaps a benefit that some people hadn't been anticipating of all that research.
It's good, and what I find with it too is that you can keep going back and validating what you're doing, and it's that idea of you don't lose your way. You've always got that anchor of what the users actually want to go back to.
Yeah, and we're lucky in that our users, whether they're our law firms, barristers, our clients and help seekers, they're very engaged in this project. So it's quite easy for us, if we are testing a new idea, if someone's put something forward, it is quite easy for us to go back and test that idea. And then it really short circuits those round table conversations about what if we did this? We can say, well, let's ask them.
That's right, because we've got the information here and we can go back.
Yeah.
It becomes easier.
Exactly.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's that one of the tenets, obviously, of design thinking too is learning by doing.
Yes.
And I think that whole thing of you go through, you learn, you might fail, you might get things wrong,
Yeah.
but the next time you do it, you're on much more of an easier course in terms of how you can do that.
Yeah, and that's been a really interesting process in a legal setting. From a change management perspective, getting our staff comfortable with the idea that we're releasing a product that we've decided our threshold for releasing a product was that it would do no harm. It would at least make the consumer experience the same or better than the current experience. So we weren't going to put something into the world that made it worse. But the idea that we would put something out there that we knew wasn't perfect, that we knew could be better here, here and here, made some people very uncomfortable.
It can be confronting for
Yes.
people who have been trained legally
To
to get
be
things
perfect.
perfect.
Yeah. So that has been a real change process. But the organisation is 100% on board now, because they can now see that we put it out there and then we ask everyone who used it in the month that it was out there, what did you think of step 3? And we get this amazing data, and we could have spent a month trying to improve step 3 without that data, but now we know what people think about it, and we can really easily iterate on that with that lived experience data instead of artificial data.
So powerful.
Yeah.
So some people, one of the reasons why we're doing this series of interviews too is for people who don't necessarily know where to start with legal design or design thinking. Some tips for people who are just starting out on the design thinking journey?
Yeah, I think curiosity is the key here, and engaging with the end user. So even if you're not doing it perfectly, if you're talking to people and you're actively listening and you don't have a rigid product plan, you've got an open product plan and you're curious and you're prepared to adapt or even kill it.
Yes. Yes, do away with it.
Do away with it, exactly. I think that's the most important thing. And it's so different to how we've been taught as lawyers. And in a funding environment, it's a real challenge as well. So if you're at a not-for-profit, you're trying to get funding for a project, they're like, okay, what are your 4 milestones? Tell us what you will have done with our money here, here and here. And when you're taking a design lens to it, you have to say, well, actually, the first step is we talk to our consumers. So I can't tell you what the second step is because it's dependent on the outcome of our research.
Live with the uncertainty. That's another thing I think lawyers find difficult.
That's it.
That live with the ambiguity.
That's it. And have confidence in the process that you will reach a good outcome, but you have to be comfortable knowing that you're starting on a pathway, not knowing what the end goal is quite yet.
Very good.
Yeah.
So the future of design or for design thinking in the legal profession, and with an access to justice phase, lens on it, I suppose, what do you see happening with it?
I think it's a tool in the toolbox. So it's not everything. It's not the be all and end all, but the discipline is extremely valuable. But I think it's one of many tools. So when I'm looking at creating a new product or an internal project, I'm always thinking about what tools are going to add the most value here. Sometimes you actually have enough user data already and you don't need to go through the empathizing steps because you've kind of been doing that by running your service and you're actually just ready to fix it. So it's important to not slavishly apply these models either. I think it's really...
Make it your own.
Exactly.
And make it fit your organisation, how you work, the people that you're working with too. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, but I think as a tool though, for organisations who are still stuck in a mindset of we do it so it works for us, very process driven, struggling to meet the needs of the people that they're engaging with or even understand those needs in the first place, I feel like that's when the tool is most valuable. And it's also valuable as a de-risking tool if you're embarking on a big change project. I think that's the other place where it's most valuable. If you're saying, you know, we used to not be an online service at all, and now we're moving, we want to have 50% of our business online. That's a huge change in strategy, and that's a great example of a time where design thinking is going to play a really important role in that strategy being executed well.
Yeah, fantastic. And so finally, what I'm going to ask you to do is to complete this sentence, because we're information gathering as well. So I'm going to give you post-its because, as I keep saying, no design thinking session would be complete
That's
without
right.
a post-it and a Sharpie. So if you'd like to complete this sentence for me, to me, design thinking means that the legal profession is less something and more something, which can only mean an improved experience for everyone. So less.
Focused on themselves.
Thank you. Like that one. And more.
And more empathetic. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great way to finish. Thank you very much, Kate, for your time. Really appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of the Legal
Thank you.
Gateway.
Thanks for including me.
Okay, thank you.